Have you ever noticed that the person watching this video right now isn't the same one who started watching 3 seconds ago? There's a game happening inside your mind at this exact moment, and you are simultaneously the player, the board, and the rules. The most disturbing part isn't discovering that you're playing this game, but realizing that you've always known it and chose to forget. There's a secret we all keep from ourselves, a necessary lie that sustains our entire experience of reality. We create a self, give it a name, a story, preferences, fears, and dreams. And then, in the most extraordinary movement of human consciousness, we forget that we were the ones who did this. It's as if an actor dove so deeply into their character that they forgot there's a stage, an audience, and a life outside the theater. Eastern philosophers have been whispering this truth in Himalayan caves for thousands of years. Buddhism calls it anatta, the doctrine of non-self. It's not that you don't exist, it's that the you think you are is a narrative in constant construction, a movie you're simultaneously filming and watching. Alan Watts, that brilliant provocateur of philosophy, used to say that the self is a verb disguised as a noun. You're not a fixed thing, you're a process happening. Think about it. When you say, "I am anxious," who is this I observing the anxiety? If you can perceive your thoughts, you cannot be your thoughts. If you can feel your emotions, you cannot be your emotions. There's something in you observing all of this, and when you try to find that observer, it disappears like morning mist in the sun. It's the Schrödinger's cat of consciousness. The self exists and doesn't exist at the same time, depending on who's looking. Modern neuroscience is beginning to validate what mystics have always known. Studies with meditators show that the self isn't located anywhere specific in the brain. It's an emergent symphony, a story told by billions of neurons trying to make sense of chaos. Dr. Michael Gazzaniga, in his revolutionary studies on the split brain, discovered what he calls the interpreter, that voice in your head constantly creating narratives to explain your actions, even when those narratives are completely fabricated. You know those times when you act impulsively and then rationalize why you did it. It wasn't your true self making a conscious decision. It was your brain acting first, and your mind creating a convincing story afterward to maintain the illusion that you're in control. The self is like a journalist covering events that already happened, but pretending they were there from the beginning, planning everything. And here's the part that's going to turn your mind inside out. If the self is a construction, who's doing the constructing? You're about to realize something that can never be unrealized. Perhaps you're feeling a slight discomfort now, an internal resistance. That's normal. The ego doesn't like being discovered. It spends its entire life building walls, stories, defenses, all to maintain the illusion that it's solid, real, permanent. But you know deep down that nothing in you remains the same. The you from 5 years ago believed things that today's you considers absurd. Yesterday's you had certainties that today's you has already abandoned. Remember that relationship that ended and you swore you'd never be the same person again? Well, you're not. That person died. Not metaphorically, literally. Your body's cells renewed themselves, your neural connections reconfigured, your beliefs transformed. You're a new person inhabiting an old story. But here's the trick. You keep carrying that old person's identity like a heavy suitcase you refuse to let go of because it has your initials engraved on it. How many times have you caught yourself thinking, "That's just how I am"? How many times have you used your personality as an excuse not to change, as a voluntary prison? I'm shy, I'm anxious, I'm impulsive. But wait a moment. If you can observe these characteristics, if you can name them, you're looking at them from outside. There's a space between you and those qualities. That space is the key to freedom. Think about how you behave differently depending on who you're with. With your parents, you're one version of you. With your friends, another. At work, yet another. Which of these is the true self? The uncomfortable answer is all of them and none of them. You're like water assuming the shape of the container. The self is fluid, adaptable, multiple. But we're so afraid to admit this because our culture taught us we need to be authentic, have an essence, be coherent. But what if true authenticity is accepting that you're a kaleidoscope, not a photograph? If this idea has already resonated with you, imagine what comes next. You're about to discover how to use this knowledge to free yourself from prisons you built yourself. Subscribe so you don't miss this awakening journey. Now let's get to what really matters, how this understanding transforms your life, because knowledge without application is just bar philosophy. When you realize the self is a game the self plays, you gain the most radical power a human being can have, the ability to rewrite the rules. Imagine you're playing a video game and suddenly realize you are simultaneously the character on screen and the person holding the controller. This dual awareness changes everything. You still play the game, but now without getting completely lost in it. When something bad happens to the character, you feel it, but you know there's something in you that's beyond that. This isn't alienation, it's freedom. Psychology calls this cognitive diffusion, the ability to observe your thoughts without identifying completely with them. The Stoics called it the view from above, seeing your life as a map, not just as the path. Buddhists call it the witness, that part of you that simply observes without judging. It's all the same thing, learning to play the game of self without forgetting it's a game. Here's a practical exercise that will change your relationship with yourself. Next time you feel a strong emotion, stop and mentally say, I'm having the thought that I'm anxious instead of I am anxious. It seems like a subtle language shift, but it's a psychological revolution. You create distance between consciousness and the content of consciousness. You remember that you're not the wave, you're the ocean. Playwright Luigi Pirandello wrote a play called 6 Characters in Search of an Author, where the characters come to life and question their creator. This is exactly what happens when you start observing yourself. You realize there are multiple versions of you coexisting, each wanting to be recognized as the real one. The critical self, the dreamer self, the fearful self, the courageous self. All of them are real, and none of them is you completely. But there's an even deeper secret that few know. The game of self isn't something to be won or finished. It's not about killing the ego or completely transcending individuality. It's about playing consciously. It's about knowing you're wearing a mask without becoming the mask. History's greatest spiritual masters weren't people without egos. They were people who knew how to play with the ego like children play with costumes. Viktor Frankl, Holocaust survivor and creator of logotherapy, discovered in concentration camps that even in the greatest external deprivation, there exists an internal freedom no one can take away. The freedom to choose your attitude towards suffering. He wasn't talking about toxic optimism or forced positivity. He was talking about the capacity to observe your own suffering and still choose a meaning. This is only possible when you realize there's something in you observing the game, not just playing it. Meditation isn't sitting and emptying the mind as many think. It's sitting and observing the mind playing its games, thought after thought, story after story, identity after identity. And in the space between thoughts, in that silence that exists before you name what you feel, there you are. The you that doesn't need stories, the you that simply is. And now the revelation that connects everything. The self is a game the self plays because the universe is playing a game with itself, through you. You're not a cosmic accident, passively watching existence. You're the form the cosmos found to know itself, to experience itself, to surprise itself. Carl Jung said we're made of stardust, and he was being literal, not poetic. The atoms in your body were forged in the heart of stars that died billions of years ago so you could exist now. Physicist John Wheeler proposed that the universe is participatory. It doesn't exist independent of observers. Likewise, the self doesn't exist independent of being observed. You exist because you observe yourself existing. It's the observer who creates the observed. You're literally inventing yourself every moment. When you understand this viscerally, not intellectually but in your bones, something breaks and simultaneously completes itself. The reason this game is necessary is because pure consciousness, without form, without story, is like a perfect mirror reflecting nothing. It needs to divide itself, create duality, forget its original nature to then have the joy of rediscovering itself. It's like God playing hide and seek with itself. Sufi mystic Rumi wrote, "You are not a drop in the ocean, you are the entire ocean in a drop." The self is the drop pretending it forgot it's the ocean. And here's the final freedom. When you realize you're both the player and the game, both the dreamer and the dream, you can finally relax. You no longer need to struggle to find your true self, because you understand there's no fixed true self to be found. There's only an infinite process of creation and dissolution. You're a work of art in constant transformation, not a framed photograph. So here you are, at the end of this journey that's really just the beginning of another. You're a game playing itself, a story telling itself, a consciousness observing itself observe. And this isn't scary, it's the most liberating thing you can realize. Because now you know, you can rewrite the rules at any moment. The self hearing these words now is no longer the same one who started this video. Something has changed. Even if it's just a small crack in certainty, that crack is where the light enters. Leonard Cohen was right. There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. You don't need to solve the paradox of being the player in the game. You just need to live within it, dance with it, laugh at it. Life isn't a problem to be solved. It's a mystery to be lived. And the greatest mystery of all is this: you. If this message touched something deep in you, don't let it die here. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear these words. Subscribe to the channel to continue this awakening journey. And in the comments, tell me, which version of you showed up today to watch this video? I'm genuinely curious. Remember, the game continues, but now you're playing consciously, and that changes everything.